Ready? All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is the West End Opportunity Partnership Board meeting for Monday, July the 25th, 2022. And Rita, if you could call the roll, please.
Okay. That's okay. Thank you. Okay. J. Michael Brown. Alicia Burns. Gina Dunlap. Present. Jennifer Hancock. Here. David James.
Here.
Dr. Gabe Jones. Here. David Kaplan.
Present.
Dr. Mary Milliner. Mike Nagel. Christopher Romaine. Desmond Smith Jr. Dr. Frank Smith Jr. Steve Traeger. Dr. Don Wade. Gary Williams.
Present.
And we have Jeff Knoll. The proxy. Okay, thank you so much. And we have Jeff O'Brien. Yeah. We do have a quorum.
All right. Got it. Thank you. David Kaplan, if you could turn your camera on, please.
He's traveling, I'm not sure. Mhm.
Oh, he's on the plane. I got it. Let's see. What else we got?
Oh, that's, there is, he's on the plane.
So we'll go ahead and get, well, so just a couple things. We have, if I mess up your name, please forgive me. Monique
Yes,
Porterman.
yes.
I said it right?
Yes,
Okay, all right,
thank you.
thank you. So for you all that don't know, Monique is representing the Cabinet Secretary for Finance. Economic Development. All right, I got it. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I know that it's a little warm in here for everybody. But our choice was to have a little bit of warmth or be downstairs where we were the last time. The acoustics were really bad down there. So we decided to try it up here where we could have better acoustics. So there's going to be a trade-off with warmth. Okay. And so this is where we are.
Next month, we're back at the Y.
You what?
Next month, we're back at the Y.
And next month we're back at the Y. So we'll be back to where we need to be. At this point, I'm going to take a little point of personal privilege and recognize a few guests we have here. I see President Stivers, Senator Neal, and Representative Stevenson. I didn't mess that up. See, don't look at me like that. And with that, thank you all for coming out today. And if you all have anything you'd like to say, I'm going to turn the floor over to you all to say what you want to say. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, stand up there.
And I'm listening to Rita.
Okay.
There you go. If they can still hear you.
I'll ask David Kaplan, since I know David best, if he can hear me.
Can you hear David?
Can you hear me, David?
Okay.
I can do that. Let me introduce myself. I'm Robert Stivers, State Senator from down in Clay County, and also the Senate President. And I've known David, I guess, for a few years. Yes. And I wanted to just take a second and say thank you to the board for getting involved in this. I know I wanted to come once the board was fully authorized or constituted and just kind of give my perspective about how this started and some of the things that occurred, because I've heard various things. And the first thing I want to say is I'm not running for statewide office or anything else. At a point in time, there was a call from the governor, talked to me about a couple of things about getting some testimony in front of the Joint Interim Committee of Judiciary, and I reached out to David James and Katura Harris. because the governor and I talked about it. It was a point in time we felt individuals would want an opportunity to be listened to. So after that, me personally, what can we do to help? Is there anything legislatively that can be done to help? So I reached out to Julie Rocky Adams. Julie, you're from Louisville, I'm from Eastern Kentucky. My role is a little bit different as the Senate president. What can we do? Is there something we can do to help with all the dynamics and circumstances that were taking place? And so we sat and we talked a little bit. We happened to be in a conversation with Mac Brown. And I don't want anybody to think this was a Republican or Democrat thing. It wasn't. Mac said, my family has a business down there. I want to be helpful. So we reached out and said, what can we do? Came down, set up a meeting, and sat and listened for over 2 hours with Yvonne Smith and Nick Lanier. It became very evident to me at that time that I was very limited in my knowledge, and we needed to bring some other people in. We had no ideas of what was out there available. So I reached out to Gerald Neal, Senator Gerald Neal and Morgan McGarvey, and said, let's start talking from a Senate perspective. And we did. And we talked about all the promises made, but some not kept, a lot not kept. And so we started devising kind of an idea about how the four of us could start meeting with people, think what was available, truly change the trajectory of Louisville and the West End. Point in time, we reached out to David, Katura, other individuals. We met. We didn't want to make this something that was, I've heard secrecy was an issue. We didn't want to make this something that we thought, well, everybody's going to say, well, they're playing politics. And we weren't. We were just trying to learn. We had a blank chalkboard that we wanted to try to figure out if there was something we could do to help change trajectory. So over the period of time, I remember, I'm going to look at Gerald. We met with a lot of businessmen from here, a young lady who had just left the University of Louisville. She was, I think, a doctorate level engineer. We went to Simmons several times, met with Kevin Cosby and his group. We just sat back and listened and really, I think it's David, me and you and Katura and Morgan and that was pretty much it. John McCarthy and Steve Poe were in and out of the mix. But we thought through things. We looked at what I heard, and I'll say this with Gerald, we had some pretty frank discussions, and learning about redlining and learning about gentrification, understanding the fabric, the somewhat disconnect or mistrust for the medical community, lack of educational opportunities, economic opportunities, healthcare and food services. So it was like, wow, what do you do with these issues? And to be quite honest, not much different than going to Louisville, Kentucky, poorest zip code in the nation, one of the poorest in the nation. So we just kept thinking through this about how we could put something together. And it was really Gerald and others who said, look, we need the community involved in making the decisions. That's how this board came together. A dominant group of members from the 9 neighborhoods that would be intermixed with individuals who had knowledge and understanding of how operations were run, where there were large sums of money. So in this, we came with an idea, and truly it was based on discussions where some of the businessmen would say, well, we've got businesses, we've got equipment, we don't have access to capital. We know there are things out there we could do. There was over 5,000 abandoned or basically unused pieces of property in the 9 neighborhoods. Well, how can you use those? How can you make it better? What can they be used for? So during the conversation, and this was about the only time I can remember this individual saying this, the idea was of a TIF, tax increment financing. And most people understand a TIF, on Youth Young Center, as it brings in more business to that area, therefore generating more taxes, which those taxes will go to pay for that facility you built. There's not going to be any facility. It's going to be this community. So this money is going to come into this community, or this community with this board to develop this. And there's no debt service, there's nothing. And so we thought that was a pretty good idea, but part of the problem in all this is you have to talk about, well, accumulation of wealth and passing it on generationally has always been one of the biggest issues. How do you do that and increase values of property? We reached out to individuals that dealt with Over the Rhine, I think it was called, in Cincinnati. We had Zoom calls with group in Rock Capital out of Detroit and how they were dealing with this. We went through a lot of meetings, but we also had to deal with the legal aspects of sections 170 through 174 of the Constitution, how you tax and how you have to assess, and it's not permissive, it's mandatory. So it gets into some pretty deep legal theory, economic theories. We developed the idea, and when you have 2 or 3 lawyers, and when it gets pretty esoteric, but between Morgan and Gerald and myself about what you can do, because if a person's property value goes up, which you want it to go up, because that's how you accumulate wealth. You want your home to be more valuable and then pass it on to your children. So we thought about how to do that. Well, you still have to assess it by Constitution, it still has to be taxed by Constitution. What we can do is give the money here to this group and the mechanism to take care of grandma or aunt, make sure your taxes are going to be no more today than they will be tomorrow, because this group can help them pay the incremental increase of the tax bill. As long as they live in that house and do not sell it, and it stays generational and passes, it won't be taxed anymore than it is today until 20 years passes. So these are the types of ideas we came up with. We thought they were good ideas, but then we also know that what happens to be able to create more opportunity? We needed to create some seed money. And that's the $30 million that locally raised, matched by, and David James was instrumental in this, matched by the city, and then us in the legislature making sure there's earmark in the budget. So all we started drafting, started looking at this to make sure everything was in place, that we could get this seed money, create a framework, make sure that we didn't ruin fabric or have gentrification issues, that we assisted and aided in accumulating wealth and passed on the next generation. And throughout this was really a legislative driven issue. And then as we moved towards the end, we reached out, Representative Stevenson, and let's see who else was, oh, Ken Fleming, Representative Fleming, to be our advocates in the House. Explain to them the process and step back from it, because now, once we get it passed, the governance needs to be right here in this local community. You get to step back from raising money, because we all make calls, and I can't thank all the donors enough that had faith in this process to think this is a worthwhile venture, because that money will then trigger 10 million local, I think it was 10.2, 2.8 We made calls, we had meetings, we didn't walk away from it. Because we all thought it was a good idea. Totally altruistic, totally within being something that we felt was good policy and process. When you think about the separation of parties, this was Republican and Democrat, willing or coming together to come up with a solution. So the solution is, here's a funding stream. Here's an issue that you don't want to make sure that you ruin the fabric, that you push people out like we did in over the Rhine, Cincinnati, things they experienced in Detroit. So now it's at a point in time that this board has a really good tool. Tools are only as good as the hands that they're used with. And a lot of information that we got through, and here's kind of an example of what we learned that may be an idea. Let's talk about these examples. 5,500 vacant lots for parcels. What if you were to take 2 or 3 of those parcels and put them together, create a daycare center? One of the things we learned was needed. That parcel becomes a dormant piece of property, now it's a taxable piece of property. Once that's established, and I give the governor's office credit, Secretary of Finance, once that's established, that baseline, now that property starts generating taxes. 80% of those new taxes, be it from property value or occupational tax, comes back where? It's for invest every year for the next 20 years. So money's there to help and look through here. Every dollar that is put in to create something that generates more taxes just means more money coming back for this board to decide with. To see what this community and elected basically are together by this community. So I just wanted to say this is, to me, unique. We've had a lot of people come to us from outside saying this is really quite a big step forward, but you're not designating the monies towards a singular project. You're designating the money to go back to the community for the community to invest. And a lot of people are watching to see how successful this is. And I'm going to kind of close with this because I made a lot of notes. Most people know I don't do notes. I'm a Republican. If I were here, I probably wouldn't be voting for Craig Greenberg this fall. But Craig Greenberg had very little to do with this, and so did Steve Poe. They just were kind of technocrats that said, looking at this, understanding development, understanding taxes, understanding sections 172, 173, 74, of the laws and all this. How do you think this is going to be viewed and you interpret this? They very, very limited. But in that, there was a lot more that came out of this than just this that I don't think a lot of people realize. The relationship that developed between 4 members of the legislature and then Pam Kim Fleming really led to several of the pieces of legislation that we passed, particularly Senate Bill 270 done during the same session, which then combined our 2 HBCUs, K-State and Simmons. Because of separation of church and state, we can't directly appropriate to Simmons state dollars. And there's a legal case that was done 12 to 15 years ago with the University of Cumberland with Baptist. So we had those 2 form this partnership. And then we did the wraparound services mandating that the cabinet come to the Simmons College area to discuss with students what was available for them in the way of healthcare, childcare, educational services, and do the wraparound. So these students, be it traditional or non-traditional students, would have better access to the Simmons College campus. Plus, Simmons be put on a track where they could receive financial aid and scholarship fund because they weren't accredited yet. So that student could also receive those monies. This is what we learned out of this process. And then turn around to this year, where it's a different standard on federal dollars, we were able to look back and give them federal dollars to assist in the growth and build out of their school because we understood these dynamics. Last morning, there was no secrecy. There was, we came out and announced this. We were talking at 4 o'clock in the morning, trying to get the language right, to make it accepted, make sure that individuals, which is very technical, that this would not harm anyone to create that funding structure. We did this, and then it got to the point, can we get it passed? It was tough to get it passed because Gerald and I had this discussion. I said, Gerald, how many people in Eastern Kentucky do you think about when you get up in the morning? Not many. People in Eastern Kentucky, Western Kentucky don't think about people in Louisville too often. So to get this passed, I made the conscious decision to really roll out, put together a game plan where we would swap out doing some things with the House to make sure it got past the framework and the legislation 270 and the funding, because there is a single sole motivating reason we did it. Because it's what we felt was the right thing to do. No politics, no preference, bipartisan, bicameral. And that's what I wanted this group to understand, that there was no ulterior motive, because I'm probably one of the few Republicans that's not running for statewide office right now. But this is done, and a lot of people cooperated, and it was done with the best of. So I wanted to explain that to the board. Again, thank you all for stepping up and getting involved in this. I know y'all got a lot of big decisions, how to start investing this money to create more money. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to kind of explain the process and what we did, and how we did it, and who drove the process. Because a lot of things that based on misinformation, I think have not been accurately portrayed through. With that, if anybody has some questions, I take them. And I don't know, David, how you want to do it. It's your chair.
But Gabe, I saw your hand first.
Yeah, cool. So my name is Gabe Jones. I am the representative for the Russell neighborhood. So thank you for being here today. I have some questions, and they're really based off of what I have encountered when I engage with my neighbors, right? So when I go sit on my neighbor's porch to talk about their questions about the TIF, what do they want to know? What are they concerned about? What are they hopeful about? These are sort of the things that I've arrived at. So the first one, if you could even speak directly to my neighborhood, what would you say to people that are hopeful about the TIF, but are extremely suspicious of you and anybody else from outside the community who is making decisions for the community? So I guess why you and why now?
Well, I will tell you me, and then I'll tell you about decisions. I'm going to start with the decisions first. The only decisions that we made was a mechanism to give you all money for you all to make the decision on how to invest. We're done. We're walking away from it. It's not City Hall. It's not Frankfurt. It's not Washington. It's the 9 neighborhoods who are going to make the decision with the other appointed members of the board. That's it. Why me? Why did I step up? I see my responsibility as a Senate president, which I'm third in line to be the governor if something should tragically happen to the governor or lieutenant governor. I have a role beyond the geographic confines of the 25th century. Louisville is our largest city. It benefits everybody in the state for Louisville to be strong. It generates close to 18% of all our tax revenue. If we're not strong in Louisville, the state's not strong. It has a mission well beyond its geographic confines to do things like educate students, give health care to people, transportation, entertainment, all different things that are not just Louisvillians. And I said, is it Mrs. Waterman?
That's right.
I just found out that she and my daughter know each other because my daughter went to U of L and got her master's in biomedical engineering. That's an example. My daughter's from Clay County. She's not from here. But there are such things that are needed out of Jefferson County that it benefits the state as a whole. So as the Senate President, I take a little bit more of a holistic approach. That's why we decided to get involved, but not by myself, but with various people we could identify to have discussions with, like Gerald, like Pam, like Morgan, say, what can we do together? That's it. That's why I say it was done with the purest intent.
Can I have a couple?
Sure.
I just have a short list here. So you mentioned your knowledge of redlining and all the historical and contemporary things that have been very specifically done to harm Black people. And even more specific to harm the west end of our city. And that contributes to all of the things that I think many of us are here to resolve. So with that in mind, again, with the suspicious that people in my neighborhood have, and they want to know, well, if he's suggesting this for us, what does he have to gain? So I just want to ask, do you have anything to gain from this legislation?
Only that the west end of Louisville and Jefferson County as a whole will get better. The state will be better. I have no personal financial gain.
This one is sort of just soliciting advice. So for this legislation to be successful and for you to look back in 2 decades and say, that went perfectly, what 2 or 3 things have to be true?
I think you're going to have a good knowledge of how to use this money where it generates more money. And let me example. Secretary Brown's here. He knows what he's Secretary of the Cabinet. He knows the Finance Cabinet has been establishing what this area takes in tax receipts. So, example, baseline, let's say it takes in 80 million or $100 million. I can do things that I can easily $100 million. So that's the baseline. Those tax receipts are going to continue to go the way they go, as they always have in the past, up until that baseline has been created, which I think is this year. Every dollar above that baseline, then 80% of it will come back to this board to invest. Not me, you all. And so if you say, this may be exaggerated, it may not be, but I'm going to use it as an example. Let's say next year it goes up to $110 million in total receipts and taxes, because you've put in $30 million and created business. Brown-Forman has expanded. You've gone in and made decisions to invest in partnerships, in daycare, something of that nature. So you've seen $10 million more in additional tax revenues. $8 million comes back to you all that invest. So making good investments like that is just going to continue to generate. Then you say, well, do we need to put something into teacher training? Do we need to work with Simmons? Do we need to have more vocational technical trainings? Do we need to look at hospital care? Do we need to look at other businesses? Do we want to work with small businesses? Do we want to look at somebody in partnership with housing? We can take some of this money and say, look, if you want to come in here and take some of these tracts of land that we've talked about, put them together and do a 300-unit housing facility. But for us to invest, you've got to agree, and this is just examples, you've got to agree that 25 or 30% of them have to be controlled rent housings, but overall it generates you more money, and you have more money to do that for 20 years. With a possible theory, and this is one that Morgan came up with, that, well, maybe we want to put some of that money back. Let's say it does go up to 110 million, and then the next year it goes up to 115. Let's start putting some of that back. So after 20 years, we've got a $30 million trust fund there. Generates a couple $1 million a year that we can continue to invest beyond the statutory life of this statute. That's where the understanding and knowledge of the dollar, and then the understanding why, and again, I'm telling you who pushed for this. Gerald said we got to have people having input in this community. There's the advisory board, and then there's this board. So there can be total input, not from me, not from Morgan, he's living on the other end, not from Julie, not from anybody else in the legislature. Total input from this area. as to how we spend and invest.
I think I have two more quick ones. So one question that I get a lot in my neighborhood when I'm talking to people is, Gabe, I love you and I trust you, but neighborhood representatives are not the majority on the board. So can you talk about what went into the composition of the board?
And neighborhood representatives, I think, are 9 of the 15, of the 21, okay. All right, neighborhood, that's right, 9 of the 21, but then it's other entities that are located here that are African-American driven, that are located here that make it up, that the majority of the board is from the West End. And so that's what we wanted to make sure, that it was dominated by West End individuals or West End entities.
It's a minority voting group, it's not dominant. There are more representatives.
Excuse me,
I'll clarify.
Excuse me.
My point.
So my last question, and again, if you could just speak as though all of my neighbors were in here with me. I encounter a lot of people who are stuck in this area between recognizing that we have to do something we've never done to get something we've never gotten, and also recognizing that I don't really want to be the guinea pig. So what would you say to those people who are in limbo between those two people?
Well, I don't think anybody was ever perceived to be a guinea pig. You know, this, if you think about this in its purest form, this is a funding stream. Think of it as water. This is a spigot of water that is going to flow into West End for this board to determine on how to invest. That's the simplistic model this is. And I don't know if you, yeah, I think that's not the guinea pig, it's just who has made these decisions before. You know, money comes in here and it's picked and chosen by other individuals. This money has now been turned over to this board, pick and choose. And then I think that's an extraordinary model because it's kind of home rule. And it's a pretty substantial amount of money that you all get to choose, not City Hall, not Frankfurt, not Washington, D.C. You know what, I appreciate the question. I like the thank you.
I think Michael Gussie are in.
And I hate to take up this time, but I'll, you know, I just kind of wanted to come up here so y'all could see me and know what I'm doing and why I was involved in it. But I'll gladly take the questions.
So Mike Daigle, Portland neighborhood representative. Thanks for coming up here. I know it's a long trip. Thanks for your leadership on the process. No bill has ever been perfect. This one's not, and as we build things, you know, I mean, we're building it from the ground up. As we find areas that need correction, are you willing to help make changes to the bill?
Oh, but we discussed this. I said we were up at 4 o'clock in the morning talking about how this would be interpreted or that would be interpreted. Let's go back to KIRA, the Education Reform Act. It's been revisited and revisited and revisited. Our Economic Development and Tourism Acts have been revisited and revisited. Just the fact of technology. And this is one of the things when I remember dealing with this, and Marvin Johnson reached out to me from Charter and said, you know, we're hearing what you're going to do. We're going to look for somebody to put $1 million with. And I think it was put maybe with Urban League down at the facility that was built, because one of the problems we found in our discussions was you may have connectivity, but you got a problem with paying the access fee. And so how can that help? You know, those are the little nuances you find that sometimes are big nuances that, you know, you have to go back and say, well, wait a minute, we've got to change this to make this work. Very open, because I've been around 26 years now. And I'm gonna go back, criminal justice reforms, anything like that, we've always had to revisit them. You know, we always look at stuff, it always comes back. So that is always something willing to do. Because practical application in theory sometimes meet really is good. And make great policy. Sometimes they meet, but there's a few, what I call potholes and speed bumps. We have to address those.
You're willing to maintain communication with this for future change.
If they want to. That's again, this is going to be for this group's rock. I don't have any control.
We're happy to see you step away if we need your help. So we call you.
Just reach out to Jeremy.
Is that it, Michael? Anybody else?
And right here.
Any other board members have a question? Any other board members have a question?
I just thought of the merits of
No,
it.
thank you. No, thank you. Thank you, President Stivers.
So
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you.
questions of the presentation,
This is a WEOP board meeting.
so the public cannot ask questions of
Thank you very much.
of our local
Senator
government.
Neal,
He said he could answer questions. The public cannot
if
answer
you are
questions.
going to interrupt the meeting, you will be asked to leave.
We're confirming.
If you're going to interrupt the meeting, you'll be asked to leave.
It would be an interruption if I had my question.
That's right.
Senator Neal.
First of all, I want to thank you for the invitation. Also, I want to say that very encouraged by what I've seen in terms of the board actions it's taken. The reason why I say that is because this is new. It's really new. In fact, we looked all over the country to see what else was like this and determined, and we couldn't find a model like this. And I think your point's well taken. There is no perfect anything. But the question is a workable model. It's workable because of you. I look around here and I see the quality of individuals in their eyes, the fact that they show up at meetings, their involvement in the community. All that means something. So I can primarily just say thank you for taking on this responsibility. It's an awesome responsibility. It's awesome in multiple ways. I'm going to get into all the details because I can be here all day. I'm going to deal with a couple of things. First of all, let me say this. I listened intently to President Stivers' presentation. He knows me well. He knows that if there's something else to be expounded upon, but I did not detect anything that suggested to me anything other than what he said. That's may not fold. Right, when we started out, we had absolutely no idea. That's why we had to invest in it. We had to look at this. But I had three areas that were absolutely me. I think for others as well. One was involved. How do we know what the community wants? Well, somebody said, well, you talk to me, but I represent 118,000 people. I can't talk to everybody. But I can talk to a lot of people because I know a lot of people. The reason I share that is that I've lived in this community my entire life. You just walk in and come from someplace else, born in a bed in Beecher Terrace, lived in the California neighborhood, grew up there. At an office, it functioned 20 years in Russell. Not only that, lived in the Russell, worked in the Shawnee community, actually incorporated a number of the neighborhood associations that are functioning now. That was decades ago. I've been in this community. I know this community. I fought in this community. And I think people who know me understand what my commitment is. It does raise serious questions, though, because nobody has an answer that's perfect. It's a complex problem. As you pointed out, sir, you talk about redlining, something like that. That's something that evolves over years. It's structural. All kinds of things. Racism is involved. There's no question of that. When I see people run away from that, I know immediately they're in a mode of denial. So I don't have all the answers, but I do know this, that you have to have a door where people can participate. In a very intelligent, very thoughtful, very committed way. I think you have that capacity and that opportunity. I truly believe it. I can say to you that in my travels, in my journeys, in this community and beyond, I've seen a lot of people that want to do good. And I've seen them come up very short in terms of outcomes. So when people elected Gerald Neal go to the Senate, I did not take that lightly. I knew that as a representative, that's what I am. That's what myself, Representative Stevenson, we voted, go and represent. That's what we do. Our responsibility is to the best of our ability to bring back value. I think that's what we did here. But it's also our responsibility to make sure that we don't undermine the ability of a community to input a process. And that's what, as the president indicated, I insisted upon certain kinds of things. You got no pushback on these issues. So I got to tell you, I can take you through this process, but I do want to point this out to you. Legislative process. It's not a matter of saying I have a good idea. It's going to happen. It doesn't happen. It's a very difficult process. I remember one year not 1 year, but on one instance where I was trying to pass a bill that I thought was just a great bill. It took me 7 years, several times to come back to pass that bill. And then I had to steal an opportunity to make that happen. It's a difficult process. It's not what most people think. It's a very difficult process. Think about it just for a minute. There are 100, I think President Stabler, Robert, alluded to this, is that there's 100 state representatives. They represent people all over the state of Kentucky. There are 38 senators. They represent people all over the state of Kentucky. They want that $30 million or that $10 million from the state. Because all of them have needs, all of them have wants, all of them have ideas. But in this particular instance, navigating that process took a combination of individuals, and I cannot undermine the importance of the President of the Senate, the work that he did in that regard. I have no hesitation with that. Get the party stuff. You know, I'm talking about people doing work that bring value back to a community. So I sit around that table. We went about 9 months, more than 9 months. Go over and over and over. Then we announced it so that there was another 3 months. So individuals could continue. Here's something else I want to tell you, because I bring them up just a little bit. He didn't tell me, look, I can't talk to everybody, but I'll tell you this. I counted it. I talked to over 200 people before we finished that process in the community. They weren't all big people. When I say big people, people are in charge of everything. I'm talking about people down the street from where I live. Streets where I lived in other communities in the footprint that we talked about. I'm talking about, and they gave us great ideas. I brought them back to the table. And guess what? They were embraced. The whole involvement of community representation, the issue of Black-led or majority Black involvement. This is unprecedented in this particular regard.
President Leggett.
And
Excuse me.
respect to each other is a very important thing. But let me just go ahead. The fact of the matter is that I am a resident of West Louisville. And aside from me being a legislator, I have a voice independent of that. And I want to say this as that voice independent. I respect what you've done. I know you have an awesome responsibility ahead of you. Anything that I can do to support that in some way, I'm available. I encourage you to reach out to me individually if you so choose, or collectively. I very heartily see that you selected an excellent executive director, someone with the intelligence and respect of the community, certainly has my respect, and those that I know her. But I'm saying that you're off to a good start. The only way you can mess this up is negativity. Has to be the attitude that we want to build something good for people. There's nobody in this room going to walk away with anything in their pocket. The question, Would ask that question. That's a good question. That's an excellent question. Nobody in here will walk in anything. Just to make it straight, you know that house thing, my house lives in that district, right? My house is in that district. But it doesn't qualify. In fact, we set it up so a house like mine would not qualify. To be those that were in need, that could use that in order to stabilize housing in the community. So we were very thoughtful there. I'm very proud of the work that we did. And I'm available for questions. So, yes.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Chicks up. You said there were 3 reasons you set that up and you said community involvement was the first. I didn't get you on.
Well, the other one was that the President Cyrus, Robert said too, is that the state didn't dictate to this board what it needed to do. Want to make sure that there was independence in terms of what this board. The other one was making sure that there was the ability or not only have that independent, but the ability to have a flexibility to do what was needed. So you have flexibility. There's nothing on you other than the questions that the legislation has framed, which is very, very broad. That was done on purpose. So you can create all day long. It's not going to be created in Frankfurt. It's not going to be created in the city of Louisville. It's not going to be created in Washington. You're going to create. You're going to create. Keep in mind this whole idea of the TIF and all this sort of stuff. Look, I have a different take on all that. You see, that $30 million plus, if that so-called TIF went away, does not negate the work and obligation of the West End Opportunity Partnership. It is not a TIF. TIF is a funding mechanism. You take that money, you do good things with it, funding sources will run to your door to support good ideas and local stabilization. You already heard people from outside are looking at this. They want to see what we do as a community. They want to see what you do as a board, the decisions that you make. And look, one last point. This sustainability of money is important. Can't go on a spree because you got to get out. It has to be set up in a way, in my opinion, that structurally sustains itself, notwithstanding how it performs. So keep in mind, that goes away, you got $30+ million. No entity that I know that's dominated by a Black board, that kind of girth, has that kind of seat at a table. And look at this seat at the table. Because the big kahuna in this is who? City government. City government's the big player in all this. Keep in mind, guess who else is a big player? All these other entities, nonprofits and others that have visions and investments, churches, you have CDCs that are doing work. So right now, there's another opportunity for them to redefine their relationships with each other, redefine what their objectives are, and talk in ways that they haven't talked historically. This is an opportunity, and you have a key historical role making this happen. So any questions?
Board members have any questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And they say that women are long-winded. I'm here to simply listen and also to express my profound appreciation. No one in this room has nothing to do. And that you would do your full-time job, or do your full-time life, and then come here and stand for other people that have a life. That you would come here and say, how can we get together and make this what we want it to be? I appreciate that. And I thank you for opening the eyes of people to say, yes, this is really our time to come together and make something happen because we're in control. We've never had that before. We've always had something done to us. And now we get to say, hi, how, we get to say, who. And it's going to be because of this board. Thank you. Thank you for all that you bring to the table there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Next up is approval of minutes. Everybody got their minutes in their email. Are there any corrections or deletions to the minutes? Michael,
Section 5 for board education, I think that got
one more time, I can hear you. I'm sorry.
section 5 of the minutes for board education that had Gary Morris. I think that got postponed to today.
Right. So we need to eliminate, you need to correct that by.
Did I leave it on there?
Okay, by removing it. Anything else? Right, have a motion to approve. Motion to approve minutes.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Hancock, the second. Second by Michael Nagel. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are passed. Board education. I think we have Gary Morris here. Is that not true? There he is.
He needs to come off of mute.
Gary, could you turn
Yeah,
your
he
mute off?
did. He did.
Okay.
Yes,
Can you hear
sir.
us? All right,
Yeah.
we can hear you too. So Gary is with the Executive Director of Department of Revenue, Office of Tax Policy and Regulation for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And he is in charge of all TIFs that the state does throughout the state of Kentucky. And so we've invited him to do some board education to talk to us about TIFs in the state of Kentucky. Gary, floor is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate very much, and it's an honor to be here today to talk to you all about TIFs from the perspective of the Department of Revenue. As someone stated earlier, we are part of the Finance and Administration Cabinet. And I'm going to talk to you about the state TIFs. I won't talk about the local portion, but I'm going to talk about the calculation and how it works for this particular TIF. To make a couple broad comments about the TIP programs, we're working presently with approximately 30 different TIP programs. And this particular TIF program for the West End Opportunity TIF, it is unique. I've heard it described as unique today and in other meetings. It's unique in the size of the TIF project. It's unique in that the board will receive monies and then decide what projects that money is spent on. And from our perspective, it comes down to a couple key calculations on what determines the numbers and the monies that the TIF project would receive. First, it's a before and after calculation, and the before calculation is sometimes referred to as the base year, or in the statute, it's referred to as old revenues. And then the after calculation, if you will, are all the subsequent years up to 20 years for this project that will hopefully generate the kind of money that will result in the new revenue years, the after years. If that number is greater than the old revenues, then a positive result occurs and we issue checks that would go to the board. All the money that gets considered comes from activity within the development area, which is, displayed in the map on the partnership's website. And there are 3 state taxes involved: sales tax, withholding tax. Withholding tax is the withholding from wages that gets taxed as individual income tax, and also the property tax paid on real property. And those 3 taxes can result in, widely different numbers. But I think an important point that we wanted to make today with this opportunity we have to explain is based on the statutes that govern this TIF, the old revenues base year would be 2022. And the first year that increment could be applied for would be the 2023 tax year. That's these are calendar year computations. And the returns and the monies paid that come into the Department of Revenue that would be subject to this calculation, occur even a little bit after the year end, whenever the returns and the payments are made. So it would be sometime in the spring of 2024 before we would certify the final numbers, inform the board of what those numbers are, and get to the point of sending checks for the amount that would be due if the 2023 numbers are greater than the 2022 numbers. And each of those three taxes I mentioned are a separate calculation. And then the reason that those two periods are where we start these calculations from is the statute defines old revenues as the year before new revenues is defined in the statute, and that is determined by being a year after the fundraising goal from the private donations was met. So that achievement was done at the end of June. And so 2022 is going to be the old revenues year, the first one. And then 2023 will be the new revenues year. And then going forward until the 20-year period is complete. Another key point is that the before and after calculation, the result is multiplied by 80%. So the amount is reduced by 20% is what that means. A lot of the other TIF programs have that same adjustment made to them. There's a few of the more newer TIFs that have even lower percentages. One other overall thing about TIF projects from the state calculation perspective is that a lot of them are administered by the Cabinet for Economic Development. And that's another unique feature of this particular TIF, the West End Opportunity TIF, is administered by the board that you all are serving on. Now that's a whole lot of information I've thrown out there in a short period, but the one thing that I wanted to accomplish with my presentation here is just briefly explain how the state TIF revenues are calculated and when that would start for this particular TIF. And I'll be glad to answer as many questions as the board has for me. And if I don't know the answer today, we'll get it back to you awfully fast. And I see one hand raised, but I defer to the chair.
All right, I happen to see Dr. Gabe Jones is first, so
Set in a good place today.
yeah.
So Gabe Jones from the Russell neighborhood, and this is a question that I've been asked a lot, so I just want to clarify my own understanding. So as it relates to the involvement of sales tax specifically, when we talk about increases in sales tax, is that speaking of an increase in revenue as a result of new activity or an increase in the sales tax percentage itself?
It should be the increase in new activity. However, if there is there's nothing to prevent the inclusion of additional revenues down the road if there is an increase in the sales tax rate. That's not contemplated here because there wasn't an increase in sales tax, state sales tax enacted this year, but that's a possibility. But it is intended to generate additional funds from the additional economic activity as we go through the years of the 20-year cycle of this TIF.
All right, so just one quick, I just want to clarify one more time.
Yes, sir.
So folks who live in the West End don't need to worry about paying an increased sales tax percentage as a result of this legislation. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's only an increase based on new activity. It would take it an action by the General Assembly to increase the sales tax percentage.
Got it. Thank you.
Michael Neal.
So I've got a question about the withholding.
Yes, sir.
How do you tell what counts for withholding and what doesn't? So let's say a large hospital moved to the West End. If they don't create a separate LLC or corporation that exists separate, and all of the employees work for the large corporation, how do you guys know that that withholding is new?
That's a very good question, sir. And it's one that we deal with in every TIF that has withholding tax in the state calculation. And what we do is we pursue identify the businesses involved, and we pursue getting separately stated withholding information that applies just to that location in the TIF. So if the new hospital is built within this TIF area, the development area, then we will get that withholding information and we'll go after that. And we have a pretty good record of getting cooperation from businesses that locate within the footprint.
You guys have never had a footprint this large.
Pardon?
Have you ever had a footprint this large?
No, this is geographically by far the largest one.
And then are there any estimates for what taxes, what sales, withholding and property taxes are currently collected within the area?
That's something we're presently working on. We initially started out looking at 2021 numbers. And then when the fundraising threshold was not met until we got into 2022, we've restarted, if you will, on 2022 numbers. And I don't have anything available that I can share with you today, but I will say this, there are several thousand businesses that we've identified with sales tax numbers, and we're going through that same process with withholding tax. And because of the records at the PBA's office, our property tax staff informed me last week that there were, I believe, 28,700 real property parcels in the West End. That might change as we continue to go through our due diligence to determine the numbers, but I just wanted to share that since you asked the question.
You know, when we might see an estimate?
I apologize, I can't give you a specific date at this time, but you know, the first numbers are going to be for this base year, and so you know, won't have anything to compare it to until we get into 2023. But whenever we get the actual numbers for 2022 finalized, we will notify the board of what those numbers are. And so you would have an exact idea then.
but we're at least several months out. is what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
Gina Dunlap.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Morris, for all of this wonderful information. I had a question about the concept of activating the TIF. From your perspective, at what point is the TIF activated? And what role might the interlocal agreement play in your procedures in terms of activation?
If I understand your question correctly, you're asking what role the grant agreement that you have with Metro Louisville government will play in what we do?
No, sir. Some separate and apart from that, we're supposed to have something referred to in the legislation as an interlocal agreement, meaning that I guess various parties at the county level, but maybe perhaps the state level. The interlocal agreement is something different from the Metro grant agreement that I'm referring to. And if there is no role or linkage between them, that's a good answer too. So.
I want to check to be sure, and the answer may be what you just stated, but I would prefer to check and report back to the board on that, if I may.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any other board members have questions? No? All right. I just want to follow up on what Dr. Jones had asked you earlier. The TIF does not do anything that increases the sales tax on people that live in the TIF district. Is that correct?
It does not increase the sales tax rate. If there's more economic opportunity, more stores, more service businesses, people will have the opportunity to go in those businesses and spend their money there. And whether they end up paying more sales tax out of that because they're purchasing more, that's a personal decision. But no, sir, the percentage of the sales tax is 6%. That didn't change, and the General Assembly hasn't changed that. It's been contemplated before, but it would take an enactment by the General Assembly to change that and place a higher rate on the sales tax. And it would be a statewide change too, if they did that. So that the answer is no, the people will not pay a higher sales tax rate. It's the way I would phrase that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Well, sir, I would just like to say to you, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for educating us, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. We'll keep working very hard at this. We have a team of people at the department that are working on this and some of the other tests, but this is a high priority for us. And it was an honor to speak to you all today.
All right. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Morris.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll continue on with our board education. We have Sam Wardell and Amy Kubich. Sam Wardell is an attorney with Frost Brown Todd, and Amy is with the Takao group. I hope I said that right. And we're going to talk about open records. And so, Sam and Amy, the floor is yours, and thank you for being here.
Amy, the floor is yours.
Okay. I will just quickly introduce myself since I am new to you all. My name is Amy Kubich, and I am a lawyer with the Louisville law firm Tack-On Meek. I have been a lawyer in private practice off and on for 25 years, and a good deal of that has been in assisting public agencies with their open reading meetings and open records obligations. So that is the main thing that we're going to talk to you today. We're not going to give you a lot of specifics or talk about any particular requests that you've gotten, but just here to reiterate the fact that as a creature of statute under House Bill 321, the legislature in creating the partnership did subject you to the open meetings and open records laws. So I know Sam has been assisting with some of that compliance, but now that you have gotten the seed money and hit the $30 million threshold, things are ramping up. I'm coming on to help you all firm up your procedures and policies and to get you all on your footing going forward to deal with the increased scrutiny that's going to come with that. So just here essentially to introduce myself, explain to you what we are going to be doing, and that we will be coming to you over the next few meetings with more information about any firmer policies and expectations as far as board members regarding your obligations to maintain materials and how we're going to help you with that.
Okay, thank you. Sam, do you have anything?
No, what Amy said was perfect. I've been privileged to assist the partnership over the past few months in this transitional phase. And all I can say is it's a fantastic organization and it's been a privilege. And Amy is the perfect person to be guiding you all. She was very humble in how she introduced herself, but she is the former general counsel to Governor Beshear, the current president of the Kentucky Bar Association. When she says things on behalf of the partnership, everyone's going to know that has immediate credibility, that they can trust her. She is absolutely the perfect person to be in this role for the organization. So I'm glad she's here.
Thank you very much, Amy.
Thank
And
you.
thank-
And I do want to say also thank you. I am so impressed with this organization already so far. I'm humbled to be working with you all. I think this is a fabulous project. My husband works in the program area served by the partnership. So I'm excited to learn along with you all as the partnership starts rolling out the fruits of its mission here.
Thank you. And I think you got recommended to us by board member David Kaplan. Is that accurate?
That is right. Who I
Right.
see is still with us for at least a little bit longer.
Yeah, my flight's about to take off, but yeah, I'm still here for now.
Great. Thanks, David. Anybody have any questions for Amy or Sam?
Can the public ask a question?
All right, we have no questions for you, so thank you very much.
Clarify. The public is not allowed to ask questions.
And Jessica,
I'm just
I need you to leave the
clarifying so they
meeting.
can-
Jessica, I need you to leave the meeting.
Charles.
All right, next we have David. No, we did that. All right, next we have, yeah, report, correct?
Yes.
Interim president. Yeah. I'm not used to having an interim president.
You're gonna go up to the,
Do you want to wait? just to-
no, I was gonna say you're gonna go up to the podium.
Oh,
Mhm,
okay.
mhm. Yeah, okay.
I was just clarifying the point about whether or not the public could ask any questions, because it's a very important person to have on the call. And last meeting, there was a motion made by Mike Nagel for the open records request that was issued by the HPN Assembly for those documents to be made public, because the board had it and the board voted in favor for those documents to be made public. I wanted to ask, when was that going to be made public? Is that still a question that we will not get an answer for? I was not allowed to ask a question about the open records request that Mike Nagel made available, made a motion for the board to vote. whether or not that open records request would be honored and then made public. All those materials, this board voted yes. Last month, we were all there, including you. And I wanted to ask about when those materials would be released. And so now I'm being thrown out of the meeting.
So who from the HBA this is wild. This is wild. This is deeply undemocratic.
This is how this works. This is a board meeting. There's a time when the
Is it a public meeting?
citizens,
Is it a public meeting?
there's a time. when
I
the
thought it
citizens-
was that-
Are you gonna let me answer the question? There's a time when citizens have an opportunity to speak. It is not during the meeting. I asked Ms. Bellamy several times not to interrupt the meeting. There's a law about interrupting public meetings. She has violated that law. I've asked her to leave.
I have not. I asked about clarification on asking questions. I
That-
wanted to make sure we asked because there actually was a
Ma'am,
motion made and. a
I have
vote about
asked
this
you
very
several
issue.
times
And we got
not to
81
interrupt the
members
meeting.
and
Now I'm
no more
asking you
than
to leave the
to
meeting.
discuss about
You're
those
interrupting the
records
meeting.
requests. Can someone make sure that these materials get back to us so that they are not taken by this board, confiscated or just damaged in any way by members here? Because David James grabbed our camera equipment at the last special meeting and took it and tossed it into the hallway. We will not see our things be damaged like trust has been destroyed. And this board should be ashamed of itself for allowing these things to happen. Public cannot communicate, public cannot have questions, people do not have the ability to get access to records. And Dave, thank you for your smile. We see who you are.
You're welcome.
Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say good afternoon again to everyone. This is part of the meeting since up until this point, there has not been an interim president or CEO. But going forward, I'd like to use this part of the meeting to bring everyone up to date on my activities during the previous month. To also give you an idea about what will be planned going forward and to answer any questions that you may have. I think you're all aware that there has been a number of press interviews and inquiries. We've had inquiries from the Courier, from the NPR, and I've appeared on Great Day Live on WHAS. They've currently scheduled another interview as well. If you're interested in seeing any of the television interviews, take up, you'll be able to send that if you have an interest in it. Now, the other matter I want to speak to you about has to do with the recoverable grant agreement that we have with Mana Capital Partners. And I think you're all aware of it. It was the incentive agreement that we executed with them on the 29th of June. They gave us $1.5 million under recovery of a grant agreement. And our obligation was to pay them back $1.5 million as we received additional grant funding after that June 30th deadline. Under the agreement, our obligation is to pay them within 5 days of our receipt of funds. I want you to know that you are about to make the first repayment. And the thought that we have internally is that because this is a significant sum, it's the first time we will be making reimbursement of that nature, even though it's provided for under the grant agreement. We thought it made sense to bring that information to the board to let you know it's going to happen. Then when we get in part of the meeting that's dealing with the financial updates, I'll suggest a motion that you might want to pass so that we are authorized as staff to repay Mana $500,000 currently pursuant to that agreement. Going forward, as we receive additional funds, we'll pay those to Mana automatically. Now, also preliminarily, I think all of you are know that we are in need of office space so that we are going to be looking for office space going forward. Prior to signing any kind of lease or making any kind of obligation to enter into a lease,
We'll bring that information back. We'll have a chance as a board to weigh in on it and decision about whether or not we believe that's true. The same vein, I'm going to be working with Rita to develop a preliminary operating budget. And that operating budget is going to have to include like rents, personnel, etc. You can also expect that information be brought back to have an opportunity. I'm sorry. That information is also going to be brought back to the board. You'll have an opportunity to review and before it goes into the lab. Does anyone have any questions on that? Yes.
First part of your report concerning, I think it was the Manna grant agreement,
Yes.
seems to indicate that there was basically, I guess, a short-term loan arrangement put into place.
No, it was not a loan. It's called a recoupable grant agreement. It was not a loan.
A recuperable grant
Yes.
agreement
Yes. a
that
loan-
we are now in the process of returning funds to.
Yes, according to the terms and conditions of the agreement. Recall that our obligation in order to trigger $10 million from the city, also to trigger the $10 million from the state, was to raise $10 million by the 30th of June. As we approached that June 30th date, we had a grantor, someone in the community who wanted to help us, but who wanted at that point to be anonymous. We all now know, based on open records requests and issuing public information in response to questions, that the identity of that entity is Manna Capital Partners. So they are anticipating and are entitled to a repayment of the funds that they put in the till on the 29th of June to help us meet the deadline.
A recoupable grant agreement said $1.5 million in advance of was it supposed to be like a stopgap in the event that we missed our funding deadline? Otherwise, I don't understand why we're repaying or why we entered into a recuperable grant arrangement.
Well, that's exactly why we did it. In order to meet the financial requirements of the June 30th deadline. And frankly, in order to influence other donors to give money. Since the June 30th deadline has passed, we have had other philanthropists, other donors who have given us money.
In excess of what we were attempting to raise?
Yes. So that is why you're in the position now of repaying Manna the funds that they had given you. That was based on the terms and agreements in the document, in the contract.
So was that document circulated to the
That's
whole?
what's been made public, the general public, who've been opening records. It's been made public.
I'm gonna shoot.
Finance, the finance.
To the finance committee.
Hmm.
If there is anyone on, if there is anyone on board who is interested in getting a copy of that agreement, we can email it to you.
We have a folder that Rita established some months ago that has copies of all the grant agreements. If it could be included or added there. And, let's burn for anyone and or anybody's inbox.
We can do that. And that, again, that document has been shared with the general public.
But in short, because we made our funding goal, the recuperable grant agreement put us over the goal. So now we're returning surplus funds to the grantor?
Now, the reciprocal grant agreement did not put us over the goal.
No, the fundraiser.
Additional donations by other grantors
That's essentially
put
right.
us over the goal.
Okay. Returning surplus.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Also, let me say that I contacted a number of you to try to arrange coffee, lunch, or an early dinner
please anticipate, check your email, see if you have a note from me. I've gotten some of you already on my schedule. Meet the call, et cetera. Please go ahead. I'll reach back out to you if I haven't heard anything from you. So you can sit down and have a one-on-one conversation. Fine.
So I'm gonna be jumping ahead a little bit. I see on the financial statements that there's an increase in liability by 2.5 million. You said the management contribution was only 500,000.
They're outright gift to us with no expectation of having anything was $500,000. The funds involved in the 1,500,000. That's the amount that we will be funding to them. So there was $2 million in total for Manna, but 500,000 of that was an outright gift, so they don't have an expectation that would be coming.
So I guess I'll wait till the finance committee discussion for the other remaining part of the free bed. But I'm confused.
All right.
Any other questions for our interim president CEO?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. In the interest of making sure we have our finance, Otis Singleton, who has to leave, I'm going to skip ahead to finance committee report. And Steve Traeger, he's not on.
No, he's not here today.
All right. Otis, the floor is yours, sir.
All right, thank you. Rita asked me to fill in and I told her I'd be happy to do that. If you have the financials in front of you, I'll kind of walk through each statement and explain what the changes were from May to June. We'll start with the balance sheet.
Stand by.
No, it's just me, but I feel like an introduction is one, so because I don't know who Mr. Singleton is.
He's the person that's been handling our finances.
I'm saying, like, we should probably.
I am the director.
I got you. I'm sorry.
This person.
So Otis is the Director of Finance, Russell Development Company, and our fiscal agent. I got you. All right, thank you. Otis.
Yes. We'll start with the balance sheet and we'll start with cash. You'll see that cash increased around 19.6 million in June. And WEOP has 3 accounts now that we have to look at. There's a brokerage account that brought in 500,000 in June. And that account was used to bring in Brown-Forman stock that was donated to WEOP. There is a Stockyards Bank checking account, which brought in around $2.95 million. And that was all donations. Then there's the fiscal agent account, which is with Community Trust Bank, which brought in $16.1 million. And that was a mix of grants and donations. Now I'll go down to the accounts payable account. And if you look at that, that is a normal balance month to month, and that is made up of WEOP's operating expenses. Now, if you look at the other current liabilities, which I've heard brought up, that account increased 2.5.
Otis, 1 second. 1 second,
Okay.
Otis. I'm sorry.
So I'm not sure that what Mr. Singleton is referencing is what I'm looking at that was circulated this morning. But he'd be able to share his screen to make sure that we're looking at the same document that he's looking through, because I can't match up what he's saying to what I tweet.
Otis, are you the financial report you sent me ending June 30th? That's what you're referencing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's what you all have.
I'm not saying what the balances are because you have it in front of you. What I'm trying to tell you is what your change was from last month to this month, from May to June.
Is it possible for you to share your screen with the numbers on it with us?
I am not set up to do that, but if you need me to give you the numbers as I go through it before I tell you what the changes were, I can do that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
To refer to the document and the section that he's referring to. That would help.
Can you hear Gina when she's talking? Do I need to repeat that?
Yeah, repeat that, please.
She's at, wait,
I was asking if you could refer to the title of the document and
Okay.
maybe the section that you're referring to or speaking on, so that we can follow along. I appreciate the information you're giving us it's not here, but I'm just having a hard time matching it up to what I'm looking at.
Okay, I'm looking at the balance sheet right now. You should have a balance sheet, you should have an income statement and a cash flow statement.
Okay.
And I'm starting with the first number you see, which is your cash and cash equivalents, okay?
Mhm.
Okay, now in June, that balance increased from May to June by $19.6 million. And what makes up that cash total is three accounts that WEOP has. And one is the brokerage account, which brought in 500,000 in June. And the Stockyards Bank checking account, which brought in 2.95 million. And the fiscal agent account, which brought in 16.1 million. And that accounts for all the changes in June. And that brings you to a total now of $20.2 million in that account.
Thank you.
Now I'll go down to the, if you scroll down the page to the accounts payable. What that captures is the operating expenses of WEOP. And that's your rent and contract expenses and things of that nature. And those are pretty steady month to month. So that number's not going to change a whole lot month to month. So then we go down to other current liabilities. That number increased from May by $2.5 million. What that represents is the James Graham Brown Foundation grant. And so in that agreement, there are conditions that could possibly require a return of funds to the foundation. So this grant is not classified as revenue, rather it is classified as an unearned revenue. And unearned revenue is a liability on your balance sheet, just because it could be returned. That's why it's classified that way. Does everybody understand that?
yes, sir.
So
Okay.
Wait a minute, we have a question.
Okay.
so the Manor Capital Partners is not included in the current liabilities?
It is not, but having heard what I've heard today, it probably should have been. I was not aware of how that was structured. I've actually taken a note to correct that.
Otis, in your defense, I have not sent that agreement over to you yet.
Okay.
I thought I had, but I will send that over because you guys have copies of the other agreements, so I'll do that recoupable grant agreement. I'll get that over to you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. I apologize.
It's okay. And just so you know, the other part of that balance is the Gaines Foundation grant, because it also is written that way to where if you have to have an operating budget. And as you expend funds for that budget, then that liability will decrease and you'll recognize revenue from that grant. That gets you to your total $3 million for that account. So next we'll go down to the fund balance and I'll explain that. That increased by 17 million in June. And what this is simply is WEOP's net income for June. That's your revenues minus your expenses. Does everybody understand the balance sheet? Have any questions?
We have a question from Gina Dunlap.
Well, I guess the request, in my role on other boards, when we look at our financials, there's usually included in the report exactly what you're pointing out to us verbally. Is there a way that we could get a presentation that shows us the month to month and the change in the balances from month to month going forward with our financial report?
Yes, I can set it up so that it shows that.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Okay, moving on to the income statement.
I have a question
Wait a minute, we have a question.
Okay,
as well. My understanding is according to the discussion happening today, will the update in the liabilities amount from 3 million to 4.5 million be reflected in the minutes, or would it be a reissue of the documents?
Say that one more time.
Sure. So an understanding about the recoupable grant agreement with Mana Inc. Does that mean that we will be reissued new financial statements that reflect that 1.5 million that is recoupable in the liabilities section? Or would it be reflected in the minutes that that is going to be updated at a later date?
There's going to be a motion in a little bit that hopefully will straighten it all out.
Excellent, thank
Okay.
you.
Go ahead, we're sorry.
we're ready to go.
Yes.
Okay. So for the income statement, you will see some new lines that you haven't seen before because of all the activity last month. We'll start with the federal, state, and other funds. What that line represents is grant revenue. And that is made up of the $10 million from Louisville Metro, $1 million from Jewish Heritage Foundation, and $50,000 from the Schwab Charitable Fund. And according to what I've seen for those are grants. So that's why those are grouped into that line item. Okay.
Michael Nagel has a question.
Okay, so I was gonna ask what the 11,050,000 is. You're saying $1 million of that is from Jewish?
Yes.
Is there a reason that's not categorized under donation?
It could be. When I received it, it looked like it read like a grant, but if it needs to be under donation, I can put it there.
It is a grant.
It is a grant.
Yeah, it's a grant. I'm gonna send you all the grant documents just in case, Otis. I know some of them have gone up to maybe Kevin, but the Jewish Heritage Fund for Excellence is a grant as well, and there is a grant agreement.
Okay.
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 James Graham
Any more?
Brown, Jewish Heritage Fund, Geens and Mana. There's 4 grants, so I'll make sure you have all 4 of them.
Okay.
To follow up on that, so the difference between a grant and a donation is simply that there's no conditions associated with the money provided?
Correct.
Okay, so there wouldn't be a grant agreement for this $6 million in donations? There are no agreements or written documents?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's confusing to say federal, state, and then include other stuff. So, I mean, can we create federal, state grants and other grants, or?
I can change the title. What would you want it to be?
Set up other funds, other grants, I mean, however, I don't know.
It could just say grants if that's what you wanted to say.
And I was expecting that to be state funds, but you said it was local to city. So we're not, we're categorizing it as state money, but there's no state money there.
I mean, it might even be beneficial. I mean, I don't think we're receiving federal funds, but to have a state line item and a local line item and a grant line item, would that be possible or prudent?
Well, they're all grants. I mean, you could separate them out by federal and state and then have another grant line.
State and local. The one grant is this, well, I don't know if it's a grant from the state. I have to look and see. The 10 million from the state, 10 million from the city, and then maybe foundation grants. Does that make sense? To
Yes.
help people to discern the difference. I think that might be a good suggestion.
You said state, city, and what?
I'd say state, city and foundation and other grants, because MANA is not a foundation, like, they're not like the other ones. So I would say foundation and other. And that would be comprehensive.
Okay.
Thank you, Otis.
So we will move down to donations. And there were several, I won't list them all out in the essence of time. Churchill Downs, Young Brands, Kentucky Association of Health Plans, and Brown Forman, et cetera. I think you know what that is. Gain loss on investments. This came about because of the donation of stock, of Brown Forman stock. The day we received it, between that day and the end of the month, the stock price had gone down. So you have a recognized loss on that account. Any questions on that?
So on the balance sheet, everything's listed as cash or cash equivalent.
Yes,
You're saying some of those are stocks.
they were. So as soon as we received the stock, apparently there was a sale order put in to liquidate that stock. And so,
Stock now.
right, we don't hold the stock now. Any more questions on that?
No, sir.
Okay. Investment income, that's basically your interest from your bank accounts. That's pretty simple. The expenses are, these are once again, WEOP's operating expenses. All of those changed within normal ranges. If you have any specific questions on any of those accounts, I'll open it up for that.
One question from Gina Delknapp.
Yes,
Okay.
I have a concern, given Ms. Douglas' indication about office space. I'm wondering, have we been renting space today? And is this $6,000 a month an actual expense that would incur?
$1,000 a month, and not six a month.
So the $6,000 shows up on the income statement was not the 6 months of expenses together. Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions for Otis on that? Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
I have a question on the income.
It's a question on the income statement.
Okay.
I guess. So the press release that was released had $10.2 million, but the donations that we show as income is only $6 million. I guess some of this could be the moving in and out of MANA, but I'm having trouble reconciling all of them.
He doesn't have that.
So if you guys, from what I've heard is correct, the donation total that's listed here will decrease by $1.5 million. And your unearned and your other liabilities on the balance sheet will increase by 1.5 million. That will be the change from MANA.
That answer your question?
And I have one more on the cash.
We got one on the cash flow statement.
Okay.
There's a listing of a increase in accounts receivable, but there's nothing on the balance sheet to reflect accounts receivable. What's that?
Actually, it's a decrease in accounts receivable. A decrease is positive on the cash flow statement. A decrease of an asset is a positive number on the cash flow statement. And what that was, we had a receivable at year end. And so that receivable has been fulfilled. I'm sorry, a decrease is a positive number. Sorry about that. So we had a receivable at year end last year and we received the cash. That causes an increase in cash flow.
Answers everything. Thank you, Otis. Keep going.
Okay, so cash flow statement. The change in net assets, just to give you some understanding of the statement. $17 million increase. Again, that is WEOP's net income for June, which will change by 1.5 million as we've been discussing because of the MANA situation. Then you can come down to the increase in current liabilities. That changed by 2.5 million. There again, that's a James Graham Brown Foundation. And those are really the only major line items in this statement. And you see your total cash at the beginning of the year and your change and what's your ending cash, and that ties to your balance sheet cash.
Any questions for
Any
Otis?
questions on that?
Nobody's got any questions, I don't think, Otis.
Okay, well, that's awesome.
Thank you for your time, energy, and explanations.
Yes, and Rita, just get some information to me and I'll try to get this stuff set up so that it's a little bit easier to read for the next meeting.
Well, you know, in the defense of you, Otis, we just got the money. We didn't have these issues when you were doing the reports before, okay?
It was simple
So now
before,
we
yes.
have something to work with to clean up.
Exactly.
So I'll get that to you. And also know that we do finance education and not just on a Zoom. I mean, actually coming in for this board is one of the things that we have to work with the statute. So maybe you might want to think about that. Come in and give us all a training.
Well, something I will make you aware of is as you expend these funds, that's going to change your financials quite a bit as well. So some big changes coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for stepping up for us at this hour. We really appreciate you sticking around to help us out.
Well, no problem, and congratulations to everybody for getting this done. So till next time.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right, so Steve Traeger couldn't be here, but he has authorized this motion to be made. I'm going to read the motion. And this is what it says. To reimburse, authorizing the president, a motion to authorize the president and CEO, interim president and CEO, Laura Douglas, to reimburse $500,000 to Mana Capital Partners LLC pursuant to the terms and conditions of the June 29, 2022 recoverable grant agreement that she spoke about earlier, and going forward, authorizing the president and CEO to make the required reimbursements automatically after first giving notice to the board. Any such reimbursements will be reflected in the partnership's financial reports. May I have a second? Have a second. Any discussion?
Yes.
Gina?
So I feel a bit out of sorts being asked to approve, action against, action in relation to this agreement that I wasn't aware of until today and haven't seen as of the time we spoke. So at a minimum, I'll abstain from the vote.
Sure.
Just for that very reason. I don't really know what I'm voting.
Okay. Any other, I'm sorry.
Just let me add to the, Steve Traeger is comfortable making, that statement of support. He has seen, he's very comfortable with what it does represent. Also recall that we had the assistance of Frost Brown and Todd drafting up the first instance. So our attorneys
drafted document for us. It was not anything that was done ultra virus.
Anyone else from the finance committee that could sort of shed some light on this? Assuming that they were involved in reviewing the agreement that our council drafted?
Is that a question?
Yeah, I'm asking any other members of the finance committee who are present.
We don't have any of those members here right now.
So mine is or is not on the finance.
Oh, that's right, he is. I'm sorry.
I found out one.
How did you speak up?
Is there a schedule? Is it one single payment, a schedule of the payments? I'm confused.
No, it's, I think what Mike today that he was found, he is on the committee, but was made aware of this today.
And for further clarification, and Mr. Chairman, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. This isn't listed as a finance committee report, per se, but an update of financial information. So I'm not certain that there was a finance committee meeting called where members did not attend. That did not happen.
That is correct.
So in terms of the agreement itself, again, this is a document that was drafted with the assistance of Roth Brown Top. Also, Manna Capital Partners have their attorneys present as well. The obligation under the agreement is to make the repayments within 5 days after due sums are received. So the payments are going to be made periodically until we extinguish making the whole. Today, the request is to make a $500,000. And then going forward to actualize the agreement by making each of the subsequent payments on the schedule that's specified.
Laura, can I add something to that for clarification? It's based on new revenue being generated. So like right now, we're still in conversations with donors who did not make the June 30th deadline, like Kroger. We're working with them on a $600,000 grant. So it's not like it's going to be paid out of the 10 million. It's based on beyond the 10 million, the new monies. It's nothing that's coming out of the 10 million. We did have the income of a $500,000 donation that did not make the June 30th. And so that's the 500,000 that Laura is talking about. We do have it in. So that reimbursement goes back to Manna Capital. It's not coming out of the 10 million. So I just think it's important to make that clarification.
Yes.
Yes, a question as well. And coming from perspective of the Cabinet for Economic Development, just speaking to some of the things that I've seen in similars, starting up initiatives and things, is that sometimes there are policies that we have to go back and refer to about which documents require board approval and which documents do not require board approval. Is there an equivalent that exists for this group yet?
Not directly.
Okay.
We have some bylaws, but they don't speak to this part. We haven't got that part.
Remember during my remarks, the point I was going to make, since this is a significant sum, first time we're going to be making a repayment like this, it seemed appropriate to bring it up in front of the board so that they would be aware of it and that they could specifically authorize it before the payment.
I think, Gina, I think that's all your hand.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that, and I appreciate the transparency bringing it to us, but we're already obligated. So there was an agreement signed and we didn't authorize the signature or agreement, for the Senate. So that's what I'm grappling with. But I think what I heard Ms. Douglas say is that our council and our finance chair have reviewed or are comfortable with this document. I'm going to assume that our president signed it, and that Mr. Traeger is comfortable with us taking this action.
Which is why
That
we
is
have the
correct.
point of asking for a motion. And not to turn things too final, but sometimes we lawyers, words mean something special to us. The signed agreement basically said, we are going to give you money. It did not say, you've got a whole myriad of obligations that we give you. So from one way to look at it is the advantage was with the partnership. So there was not any apprehension or anything untoward or risky that could have occurred by saying, yes, we'll take the money. You see, and recollect also that the deadline to raise was June 30th. It was June 29th. That's part of the significant part of the school gets grant.
So the money was provided with the contemplation that if we made our fundraising goal, that money would be returned in the payment that we're about to talk about.
And if within the next 50 years, we received any more money, we would have 50 years to give them the money back. Again, the risk is, yeah.
I mean, yeah, but again, it sounds like practically a loan.
No,
Yeah,
no.
I know it's not.
It is not.
I just don't understand why we took money to give
I
it back.
think when you see the terms and conditions of the agreement, you'll realize that it's not a loan. Typically, when you borrow money, the consequences of not paying are outlined very specifically in the document. There are no consequences outlined in this document for not paying. Okay.
Right, Mike,
I understand how we got to where we are with the money. But I also think part of Gina's point is, I don't say moral hazard, but I don't want to set a precedent where decisions are getting made and then brought to the governing board after the fact. So, we need some way, and she brought, well, we need some structure to some of this because there's a lot of stuff going on that not everybody knows what's going on. And we're asked to anoint it and bless it after the fact. When we haven't seen the agreement, we're told that it's in our favor, but if I haven't seen it, I don't know that to be true. Cross Brown Town, the attorneys for Manor, Steve Trader, your finance person, have reviewed it and I'm comfortable with it. The document is not a loan document. There is no specified penalties for the organization if payment is not made. In fact, we are given 50 years. So if we have 50 years, make the payment. Review it and pay it back next month. But you have 50 years to pay it back, then the rest of the board see the agreement, and then we'll approve it next month. Well, if you're asking me, I would not advise you to do that. At this point, I would advise you to rely on the advice from your finance committee chair and the representations that I'm making to you. Go ahead and pay the money back to them. That's what I would advise, particularly since the document obligates us to pay within 5 days of receiving money, and it's been almost a month. It's well beyond the 5 days.
But there are no penalties if we miss the 5 days.
There are no penalties outlined in the document, but there's reputational damage, risk that going forward, we will not receive any other grants from this donor. The fact that it will give the appearance that your finance person and your board representative do not in fact have the authority to negotiate on behalf of this body
there's some significant reputational damage, which is why I would say pay the money back now.
Any,
You asked
no,
me, I told you.
yes, ma'am.
I'm abstaining from taking the position on this particular item in my capacity. But I was advised to make tools available that the cabinet also often uses in situations like this. In situations like this, the cabinet, we would typically, it's available to approve it now. It's available to approve it a month from now. In the event that we have something urgent that does need to be approved, we do have the ability to call for a special meeting to have approvals that would require an in-person public meeting to be made and a quorum to be present in order for that vote to happen. I'm just making sure to speak up to make sure that this board knows the availability in navigating public meetings. If it happens online, according to statute, all of the committee members would need to have cameras on. The alternative is to have it in person and publicize appropriately that a meeting would be happening.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for that.
his seat is ex officio anyway, so she doesn't have to worry about
I
the.
got you. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye. All opposed? All abstained? Did you abstain or you're opposed? Okay. So we have one abstention. I mean, one no.
No.
I'm sorry. All right. Next we have board development. Well, let me back up a little bit. Devon Holt's not here, so is anybody from board development able to speak?
We have not met.
Okay,
I will say that on behalf of our chair.
all right, skip that. And then communications, Dr. Wade is.
She is in the air right now.
Okay.
Flying, so she can't.
And then community engagement, Dr. Gabe Jones.
Yeah, so, yes, so the Community Engagement Committee attempted to get together, but I have to take some of the blame. So we were not able to get together. So what we wanted to do initially was to, one, for all of us to get to know each other, for us to establish what our concerns were about the neighborhood, about the disconnect between us and our community. We also wanted to discuss what we would like to see from the Community Engagement Committee and to start to discuss some patterns of how to engage our neighborhoods and our community on an ongoing basis for the duration of this operation, because that has to happen. What I misconstrued was the level of formality that we needed. I thought that our small committee could go have something to eat, to plan what we need to do, but we needed to have more space. We needed to give the location more time. And we also need to clarify all of our schedules further in advance so that we can do that. So we're working to.
Okay. Gotcha. Thanks for the effort.
I know how to engage community. I don't know how to, I'm new to being on the board.
All right.
Okay.
This is a learning experience.
Yeah.
Build care. All right.
Thank you.
And then old business, we need to assign term limits for our new neighborhood representatives. And we have a bag. There we go. So the bag has 9 pieces of folded paper in it. And 5 of those pieces of paper have 3-year terms. 4 of those pieces of paper have 2-year terms. Each neighborhood board member will draw and write their name on the piece of paper, turn it in to Rita, so that we can log the length of everybody's term.
What you gonna ask the questions first? Don't let you go into the. Fine. Just stuff on both back there and
Should we write our name on it?
Oh, yeah. That really is all over there, okay.
Yeah.
There you go, Jerry.
So I got
You said you
I said I got
win,
nothing.
you gotta win.
Right, okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did you read those, Rita?
Yeah, yes, yes, yes. Okay, so we have Mike Nagel, 2 years. We have Dr. Gabe Jones, 2 years, and we have Gary Williams, 3 years.
Right.
That was the most democratic process we could come up with.
All right, thanks to everybody for that participation.
And then, David, next month we'll do the other ones when they come,
Mhm.
with the balance, okay.
And then directors and officers insurance quote report.
Yes, I haven't met with him, but I did talk to our contact with Lawrence Herring, and he's sending me all the new information now that we have some money to work with. All that's in motion. I'll get that filled out and bring it back to the board in terms of the basic information that I can get completed.
All right, thank you. All right, new business, we had talked about Park Hill and Parkland. We're waiting on an update for that. One West is a entity that has a board seat. And Devon Holt's term has expired from the One West board, which means that he can't be the representative of One West. And as the partnership's One West representative, Devon will also rotate off of this board and the One West board according to statute. And so One West will then appoint a new representative to our board. And then Devon's term, which naturally ends on June 29th, 2024, would be filled by that person from One West. University of Louisville, Mark Watkins, his resignation date is effective Tuesday, July the 26th. Mark is leaving the University of Louisville and going on to bigger and better things. And by therefore not being a member of the University of Louisville, he has tendered his resignation. We already have a replacement for him. And that is Dr. Douglas Graddick, Jr., interim VP for Community Relations, which Rita just handed you out his photograph and a little bit about him. And so I guess the next thing we need to do is I'll make a motion that Dr. Graddick replace Mark Watkins. And I need a second, please.
Second.
Have a second? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. So since Mark Watkins has left,
Tomorrow.
as of tomorrow, and he was the nominating committee chair, I am naming the one and only J. Michael Brown. No, you don't want to do it?
That's not the point. I'm going into a limbo period.
You're going into a limbo period.
I'm retiring from state government effective next Monday.
Okay.
So I will be submitting, that will cause the same sort of effect that's happening.
Oh, I
with other
see.
organizations.
I got you.
And so I can't be precipitous.
I get it.
There's an expectation that
Okay.
I might be coming back on the
I get you.
representative from Simmons.
All
I
right.
can't do that unilaterally.
I get you. I got you.
So don't,
We can't commit you yet.
that's right.
I got you.
Okay.
All right. I'm gonna hold that thought. Kind of rethink. All right. So Volunteers of America. Jennifer Hancock, her term expired June the 29th. And she has agreed to serve another term as a representative for Volunteers of America. Welcome back.
Thank you.
A motion is needed, so we can make sure that we vote Jennifer back on. I make a motion that we vote Jennifer back on. Have a second. Have a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? All right. Next is David Kaplan. We need to do another term for David Kaplan. Is that accurate? Yes.
His expired on June 29th as
June
well.
29th also.
Mhm.
All right. So I need a motion. I'll make a motion that David Kaplan serve another term. Have a second. I heard a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, it says there's been a conversation with David and is he agreeable?
He's agreeable.
I don't want to volunteer.
I know. But see, that's what happens when you miss a meeting. He's agreeable. All in favor, say aye. All right, thank you. Next is Steve Traeger, who will be stepping down as the person representing the bank. As Steve works on becoming not the guy at the bank anymore to do what J. Michael Brown is doing and having a seasonal life change. And so Rita's handed out a document with William Summers on it. And William works with Steve at the bank, becomes recommended by Steve as his replacement. I'm making a motion that we accept William Summers as the replacement for Steve Traeger. May I have a second? Have a second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Don't think I left out. We're waiting on a replacement from the urban. Yeah, we're still waiting for that. All right. Any other new business from anybody? Mike.
It came up in the meeting earlier, but I was waiting to do business. And I emailed, I didn't have great clarification. We did vote last month, like, the agreements and all the other information, on the website. Do we have a timeline for that yet?
It'll be done, what is today? What's today, what day of the week is, I don't even know. It's Monday, yeah, we should have it done this week. Mhm. We'll have it done by Friday, does that help you? Okay,
I think that's Friday, the 29th, maybe?
yeah, by the end of the month, here,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other new business? All right, hearing no new business. At this time, we will allow 5 citizens to spend 3 minutes expressing their views. Is there anybody that wishes to express their views? Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
I just had a couple of questions.
There's no questions, it's just your ability to
Okay,
speak.
well, and you don't have to answer now. I'll put it in the air just for consideration. Thank you. My name is Shante West. I'm a social worker. I think I've been most of the meetings here today. Tried to read a lot of background information on what you all do. I just would ask for the board's consideration whether or not you would review the urban renewal assessment of the WER. And if there is any consideration proposing policy changes. I know you had Senator Stivers here today. So I wonder if there's a committee to consider some of the changes that are needed. I'm very concerned because it seems like the board is dropping off. We got 3 neighborhood representatives today, and there should be 9. And it seems like organizations are seeming really iffy about participating in this. There's been multiple financial agreements that haven't even been shared with the board prior to meetings, which are very concerning. Any legislative hearings of Metro Council at a statewide level, the agendas and presentations are prepared and available to the public before the meetings. And I think that this is something that's been brought up multiple times, but still hasn't been addressed, which is a lot of the community's concern about lack of transparency with what's going on here. I don't know how many of you have read that urban report, but I think it's very important that you do consider some of the things that you're just now being educated on here
today by some of the people that you're seeing, that's probably gonna go off for a year. The Urban League report is 127 pages that I feel is very crucial for this board to review, and irresponsible if you haven't read it. I think that maybe a couple of people said that they haven't reviewed it. That report's been out for close to 2 weeks now, and I would have hoped that we could hear some discussion about that at today's meeting. And also that all these materials are available so that we can review, and if there's not an opportunity for us to speak, to submit these questions prior to the board meeting, so that people don't have to be disruptive to present their views. Obviously, we have somebody here from the Open Records Department that also have concerns with the way that some of these meetings are being handled. Also, some things are gonna have to be done differently. You're in a community that's very distrustful of some of the entities that are participating in this board. For example, I understand the recommendation that things have to be done in the manner or as agreed. The concern is that the whole board doesn't even know what they are agreeing to. And I have to be honest, this is about the West End Louisville, which is primarily African American community. And you are asking us to trust a finance chair who is white. Everyone that we've seen present things about finances here have been white, and there's no engagement of Black community members, accountants, or anything like that, that community is trusting of to prepare you. So the more that these issues come up and the board is not even prepared to ask questions, I think that's a problem moving forward. And we're gonna see, eventually, we're gonna be in this room and there's gonna be 3 people at the table because you're risking your reputation by continuing to be involved.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna wait and say something about this later. I'm concerned about the constitution of this board. I understand she's a very critical person in terms of preparing things, but she seems to have more input as a young. She's very concerned with timekeeping. We had to wait through all of Senator Stiver's comments, all of Senator Neal's comments, then I missed Representative Stevenson's comments, but very tight on the time for community members to have anything to say. So my point is, with her being here, she's allowed to remain in the meeting. The last time, when all other people that were not on the board had to leave, she technically should have left the meeting as well. She's not a part of the board. Now, if you want to excuse that and allow that today, then you are referencing back and forth, not including your newly elected leader. You two are looking at each other and you two are running the meeting. So I have a hard time understanding who it is here that's the power players at hand. If you want us to trust you, then you need to start looking different. Maybe people need to sit in a different arrangement, but at the same time, it shows what's really going on. She's aware of paperwork that's been signed. She processed it through. She hasn't posted it. You're pushing an agenda. Several members of the table have questions. They're not getting answered. The community never gets an answer. And we've had questions for months. You're losing members. Now let's go to your membership. You have tabled nominations for 4 months. Mr. Holt has not been here. Now we're hearing that he's stepping down or he's being removed for whatever odd reason. That's a problem when you don't have one adequate community representation, but you don't even have organizations that you were mandated to have by law. So if you're sitting here presiding over the meeting, you're sitting here keeping up with the paperwork, you're newly coming in and letting us through. That needs to be a priority and not something that's tabled to the next meeting. If you want people to take you seriously, have this person here who has pointed out those things, but it seems to not be very important to a few of you. As we saw with the votes, and you with the executive director and other key things, community lines seem to be drawn with organizational tensions. And so if we continue to see that, it proves that all of our protests, all of our submissions, all of our questions are pointing to a problem. And if you want us to trust you, whether you're stepping down, stepping sideways, through another door in another organization, those are things to address now, not later. Building the cars we drive, building the planes we fly it is ridiculous. And so we need to see better. And again, with the constitution of the board, I know my time will probably go off, Mr. Reagan. I think that it's very important that there's less said from people who aren't on the board and more said only from board members in a true Robert's Rules of Order way.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? All right. So I'll say thank you for the reminder. Jennifer Hancock, since you were very involved in all that, with the board development stuff, bonds along here, will you work as the chair for that committee to make sure that we can have some board development done? Recognition done?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Okay, anything else from anybody? We are adjourned.
Okay, what time is it? 6:58. 6:58.